Okay, stop Googling 20 tabs. In the next few minutes, what I'll do is translate the real estate dictionary into an operator's cheat sheet, and I'll give you the between the lines angles that most buyers miss. So stay to the end. This is for high earning young professionals and first time buyers who want options, not overtime, and they want their first place to be a working asset. So I'll define each term in plain English, and then I'll give you the Mina mindset insight, what to watch for, where the leverage hides, and what questions to ask next week when we break down the actuals. So let's start with a mortgage. This is a loan that's secured by the property. Try to remember that a mortgage isn't just money, it's a set of rules. Read the rules first, fall in love with the property second. Now, there are different kinds of mortgages, fixed versus variable. With a fixed rate, the rate doesn't change during the term. On the other hand, with variable rates, they move with the market. So the insight here is that you should pick based on the risk that you understand, not the rate that you overheard. Ask yourself, what happens to my payment if rates move 1%? If that answer makes your stomach flip, your term choice is not the right one for you. Further, there are conventional versus high ratio mortgages. With a conventional mortgage, you're generally putting greater than or equal to 20% down, and there's no mandatory insurance. With a high ratio mortgage, you're putting less than 20% down, and it requires a CMHC default insurance. What I want to highlight here is that high ratio isn't necessarily bad. Sometimes the insurance buys you time to get into a market that keeps running. The question really becomes about, does the math work after premiums and today's rents? So to add more attributes, there's also closed versus open. A closed mortgage means penalties if you pay out early, while open offers flexibility to pay down early. If you're planning a refi or sale in that term, price the penalty like a line item because that's what it is. The total time to pay off the mortgage is referred to as the amortization period. Insured amortizations of up to 30 years are currently allowed, but remember, longer amortization periods lower the payment. So it's a cash flow relief, not necessarily free money. You should always ask yourself, what's my plan to accelerate later? Of course, you always also hear about interest rates, which essentially refer to the cost of borrowing, and that's influenced by the Bank of Canada's policy rate. So the insight is your real risk isn't today's rate, it's the payment shock. So underwrite your life at a higher payment and make sure that you still sleep. Another key term in this ecosystem of words is the inflation rate. This captures the change in prices over time. In real estate, inflation actually quietly reprices replacement cost. So that's why use and scarcity matter more than headlines. Then there's the mortgage stress test. This is used to prove that you can afford a bigger payment than your contract amount. So think of it as a rehearsal. If that payment breaks your budget on paper and your lifestyle, it's gonna break your sleep in real life. When considering your down payment, think of the formula as purchase price equals your down payment plus the mortgage. A key takeaway when it comes to down payments is the source matters. Gifts often need a gift letter. Seasoned funds keep underwriting smoother. Paper the story. If you take on a high ratio mortgage where your down payment is less than 20%, then mortgage default insurance is required. And then you need to remember that insurance is a gate. Once you're through, optimize everything else: the tenant profile, suite strategy, and your CapEx plan. It's crucial when you're considering your first home purchase or investment as a first-time buyer that you leverage all available mechanisms that you have, such as the FHSA, which is the First Home Savings Account. Contributions are tax deductible, qualifying withdrawals are tax-free. So think of the FHSA as a rate of savings multiplier. You can automate contributions, align the withdrawal window with your target closing date. You can also withdraw up to $60,000 from your RSPs, repay it over time per the home buyer's plan, which is also referred to as the HBP. The HBP is a bridge, not a gift. Run a repayment line in your budget so future you isn't surprised. Now let's say that you've narrowed in on a property that aligns perfectly with what you're looking for. What are some of the key terms to keep top of mind? First, there's the list price. This is essentially the asking price, and it's what the seller advertises. It's an anchor, not a verdict. Your job is to work with an effective realtor that can assist you in pricing the asset's utility and local demand, not to just react to a sticker. And then we have the purchase price. That's what both sides actually agree to. The terms can be worth real dollars, and sometimes a slightly higher price with protective terms beat a cheap number with bad risk. So when you're ready, the offer to purchase or the contract of purchase and sale is established, and this is the contract that sets the price and the terms and the dates. And this, my favorite part, is where we engineer risk. You deposit timing, subject wording, inclusions, holdbacks, small lines, big outcomes. These contracts naturally grant various permutations. So there are firm offers, which essentially mean that there aren't any conditions. Think of a subject-free offer like sprinting without a helmet. If the market forces it, get pre-inspection, documents reviewed, and be really intentional about the risk. Conversely, the conditional offer generally includes financing, inspection, the sale of your current home, and these conditions aren't excuses, they're instruments. So use them to validate the number, not the stall. And finally, there are always closing costs, i.e. expenses to finalize the purchase, including but not limited to legal, title adjustments, inspections, etc. Treat closing costs as non-negotiable inventory. You wouldn't launch a product without packaging, so you don't close without these. And just a quick plug, next week we'll walk through a first-time buyer's timeline and plug these terms into real dates, dollars, and decisions. So check back again next week. Okay, so, and this one's really important, you have to acquire a thorough understanding of the property type that you're considering. So there are a few main descriptors that I'll highlight because understanding these terms will help you narrow your scope based on what you're looking for. First and foremost, always embody, I need to emphasize this, your most inquisitive self when you're reviewing the title, because this will validate for you who legally owns the property. And genuinely, from my perspective, a title tells stories, has charges, easements, and covenants. Read it like a resume, what's on it and what isn't. Okay, and now there will always be a section on the listings that states title to land, and you'll see one of the following: freehold or freehold strata, cooperative or co-op, or leasehold. And I'll break these down here in a second. So with freehold, you own the home and the land. Think great autonomy, but always still check for municipal rules for suites and additions. Your freedom essentially lives inside bylaws. So you might also see freehold strata written together, whereby ownership of that property is generally unit ownership with shared common property. The hot tip here is read your strata minutes like a detective. Review the contingency fund, upcoming projects, bylaws that affect rentals or pets. These change cash flow and resales significantly. And then there's leasehold. You own the building and not the land. The land is leased, often long-term, and the lease clock matters. Lenders and buyers price the time left. Your exit strategy should too. Then there's a cooperative, aka the co-op, and as it implies, you essentially own shares in a corporation along with occupancy rights to your unit. Be wary that financing and rental rules may be tighter in co-ops, and they often are, so make sure that your lender path exists before you fall in love with the unit. Now let's define property taxes. These are annual taxes that fund local services that you're responsible for as a homeowner. Make sure you model tax changes as a sensitivity, because a small increase can squeeze a very tight budget. Also, always pay close attention to any restrictive covenants. These limit how you can use or improve the land, and covenants can quietly kill a sweet strategy or any kind of addition. So search for them early, not after you hire a contractor. Also pay close attention to any easements that essentially give others access to part of your land. So examples such as utilities, right of way. I'll caveat, easements aren't necessarily deal breakers by default. Just price the constraint and know where you can and can't build. Okay, and finally, at the core of real estate acquisition is equity. This is your home value minus your mortgage balance. So think of equity as potential energy, and the plan is to turn it into next asset energy responsibly. All right, that's the dictionary decoded. Next week, I'll put these terms on a real timeline with real decisions, subject dates, deposit timing, lender files, document reviews, and how we keep your downside protected. If you want me to tailor this to your goals and your risk profile, feel free to book a complimentary strategy call using the link below, and let me know in the comments if you want any other specific content created that would be valuable for you in your real estate journey. I'm Mina Ghaani at the Mina Mindset for Real, Design Taste, Investor Discipline. So if you like this and found it valuable, please hit the like button, subscribe, stream, and share. I'll see you next week for the first time buyer actuals walkthrough.